Have you ever felt an inexplicable emptiness, like something vital is missing, even when everything in life seems fine? You're not alone, and you're not broken. Carl Jung believed that this spiritual void, this silent hunger, wasn't just personal. It was cultural, a consequence of modern life itself. In a world obsessed with logic, speed, and surface-level success, we've traded the sacred for the synthetic. We've disconnected from the soul. And Jung saw the cost of that trade long before it became today's crisis. He didn't just diagnose the issue. He offered a path, a daring journey inward to reconnect with something much older and deeper than modernity itself. This video will take you on that path, into Jung's warning, his wisdom, and his solution to the spiritual starvation plaguing our modern lives. Because once you understand what you're truly hungry for, you'll never see your life the same way again. To Jung, modern life was becoming a machine, not just in its technology, but in its mindset. We began to value only what we could see, measure, and replicate. Productivity replaced purpose. Science replaced mystery. The soul, once central to human life, was now dismissed as superstition. But Jung warned, when the spiritual is denied, it doesn't vanish, it goes underground, into the unconscious. And there it waits. It emerges as anxiety, depression, addiction, signs of a soul crying out to be acknowledged. He called this the spiritual problem of modern man. Not a crisis of religion, but a crisis of meaning. A hunger for something real, something eternal, that modern life no longer offers. In Jung's words, the modern man does not understand how much his rationalism has put him at the mercy of the psychic underworld. We're not just starving for spirituality, we're starving for wholeness. Jung believed that wholeness doesn't come from eliminating darkness, it comes from confronting it. He introduced a powerful idea, the shadow. The parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or fear. Our anger, jealousy, fear, even hidden talents and desires. Modern people, Jung argued, are spiritually starving because they are disconnected from their shadow. In a world obsessed with appearances, perfection, and curated identities, we push anything unpleasant into the basement of the unconscious. But the shadow does not stay silent. It leaks into our behavior, our relationships, our decisions, like a ghost trying to be seen. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Facing the shadow isn't easy. It's raw, humbling, even painful. But it is also the gateway to the soul. When we embrace what we fear within ourselves, we begin to reclaim the parts of us that were lost. And that process, integration, is spiritual nourishment of the highest kind. In Jung's view, our ancestors had rituals, myths, and symbols to help them navigate the spiritual world. They had temples, sacred rites, initiation ceremonies, tools to guide them through the chaos of life. But modern man, we have traffic jams, deadlines, and smartphones. We've replaced soulful introspection with social scrolling and mythic journeys with mundane routines. And we wonder why we feel hollow inside. Jung saw that without a symbolic or spiritual system, the psyche begins to break down. Anxiety, depression, nihilism. These are symptoms of the soul's hunger. He didn't say we had to return to ancient religions, but that we needed to reconnect with the symbolic life, to see our dreams, our struggles, our desires, not just as random events, but as meaningful messages from the unconscious. In short, he urged us to take our inner life seriously again. Without that connection, we drift, spiritually dehydrated, lost in a desert of data, progress, and distractions. Jung warned that if we ignore the unconscious for too long, it doesn't just fade quietly into the background. It starts to act out. It erupts in our dreams, in our behaviors, in the way we sabotage ourselves without understanding why. He called this the return of the repressed. Those parts of us we deny or suppress don't vanish. They simply go underground and gain power in the shadows. This is why so many modern people feel like they're walking through life wearing a mask. They're smiling on the outside, but inside, they're aching. Not just for meaning, but for wholeness. We've become fragmented, split between who we really are and who we think we should be. And the wider that gap becomes, the more spiritually starved we feel. Jung's work was a direct call to bridge that divide, to confront the shadow, to embrace our inner contradictions, to stop outsourcing truth and start digging inward. Because no app, no achievement, no follower count can fill the hole left by a neglected soul. Jung believed the path to healing wasn't through perfection, but through integration. Not by erasing flaws, but by bringing the dark and light into dialogue. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That means facing the uncomfortable truths, sitting with the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid, and doing the deep inner work our culture often skips in favor of shortcuts and surface-level fixes. Modern society tells us to move fast, but the soul moves at a different pace. It whispers instead of shouts. And when we drown it out with constant noise, scrolling, and stimulation, we lose the inner compass that once kept us grounded. Jung's message isn't just psychology. It's a spiritual wake-up call, a reminder that healing doesn't come from the outside. It begins when we slow down, listen inward, and reconnect with the mystery that pulses beneath everyday life. To Jung, the psyche was not some mechanical function of the brain. It was a living system, deeply symbolic, mysterious, and ancient. And at the center of it was the self, not the ego, but the totality of who we are. The self calls us toward wholeness, not just happiness. But the path to wholeness often takes us through the desert of discomfort. It forces us to confront contradictions, question our conditioning, and even experience symbolic death, so that something greater can emerge. Modern life rarely supports this kind of deep inner transformation. We're offered dopamine, distraction, and validation, but seldom meaning. And so we drift, spiritually dehydrated, craving rituals, symbols, stories that speak to the soul. This is why Jung encouraged a return to depth. Not a retreat into the past, but a reconnection with timeless truths, archetypes, dreams, article-active imagination, shadow work, tools that allow us to see beneath the surface and meet the self on its own terms. Because ultimately, we aren't just solving problems. We're rediscovering something sacred, that within each of us is an ancient voice that remembers what the world has forgotten. Jung believed that the modern crisis wasn't just political, social, or economic. It was a loss of connection to the sacred. Not religion in the dogmatic sense, but the sacred as an inner experience. A felt sense that life has depth, mystery, and meaning that transcends the material. Without this, we become spiritually malnourished, surrounded by information, but starved for wisdom. We see this hunger in rising anxiety, depression, addiction, and existential dread. Symptoms not of personal failure, but of a collective spiritual drought. Jung didn't offer easy answers. Instead, he offered a map, one rooted in myth, psychology, and the lived experience of those brave enough to explore their own depths. He invited us to become modern mystics, grounded in reality but open to mystery, to walk the line between reason and intuition, to see that true transformation doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from integrating it. And that's the work most people avoid, because it's messy, it's non-linear, and it can't be measured with likes, followers, or bank accounts. but it's the only path that quenches the thirst we're all quietly carrying. So what does it actually look like to reclaim this spiritual hunger in a world that often feels so hollow? It begins with a return to the inner life. Jung urged us to pay attention to the quiet whispers of the soul, the dreams we forget, the symbols that appear again and again, the strange fascinations we can't explain, the inner tensions we try to ignore. These aren't distractions. They're messages from the self, the shadow, the unconscious. Clues that point toward the authentic path your spirit wants to walk. This doesn't mean you need to abandon the world. Jung never suggested we become monks or escape to caves. He believed in the integration of the inner and outer, living fully in the world but no longer of it. It's a process of aligning your outer life with your inner truth, letting go of roles you've outgrown, releasing attachments that no longer feed you, and saying yes to a life of deeper meaning, even if it breaks the mold. Because once you taste what it means to be truly alive, not just existing, not just performing, but living with purpose, wholeness, and connection to something greater, you'll never go back. In the end, Jung's warning wasn't meant to frighten us. It was meant to wake us up, to remind us that modern life, for all its convenience and progress, often comes at the cost of our soul, and that no amount of material gain, external achievement, or digital distraction will ever satisfy a hunger that is spiritual in nature. We are not just minds to be filled or bodies to be maintained. We are beings of depth, of myth, of mystery. And we are starving not because the food is missing, but because we've forgotten how to taste it. So ask yourself, when was the last time you listened, truly listened, to your own soul? Not your ego, not your fears, but that quiet, ancient voice within you that's been waiting all along. The journey towards spiritual wholeness isn't easy, but it's the only journey worth taking. And as Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens.